Aradella Varks adjusted the flowing sleeves of her ceremonial robe as she stepped into the main chamber of the Galactic Assembly. She was not yet accustomed to the shimmering rainbow lights that adorned the vast hall, each beam reflecting the collective aesthetic preferences of dozens of species. As she made her way toward the front, countless eyes, both literal and metaphorical, turned to watch her pass. She was young for a Sildorian, just shy of her 30th cycle, but she had earned her place here through sharp intelligence and a reputation for fairness. Despite that, uncertainty clung to her mind. Everyone in the assembly was talking about the same thing lately: the humans. Rumors drifted through every corridor and lounge. Alien delegates whispered of humans who devoured their enemies and consumed toxic substances for pleasure. Others insisted these beings had destroyed their own planet's ecosystem, only to rebuild it in a manner that defied known laws of ecological balance. Some said the humans had discovered ways to harness black hole energy and carry it in portable devices, turning them into unstoppable warriors. The stories ranged from the bizarre to the downright impossible. Still, one thread remained consistent. Humans were dangerous because they could adapt to anything, especially fear. Aradella had arrived earlier that day from the Sildorian homeworld, her official commission letter still crisp in her satchel. The old mentor who had trained her, Vilder Inns, had warned her that the assembly was teetering on the edge of widespread panic. "They will try to manipulate you," he had said in his gravelly voice. "Be careful. Everyone here fears humans more than they fear each other." She had not quite believed him until she looked around and saw the hush that spread whenever the word human was mentioned. High Chancellor Saren, an Euruvian whose species resembled tall, spindly trees, called the meeting to order. His elongated limbs knocked a ceremonial staff against the transparent lectern, and he surveyed the gathered delegates with 5 wide, unblinking eyes. He announced that an urgent session was convened to discuss the verified arrival of a human starship on the outskirts of the galaxy. The vessel's presence was confirmed by the observational outpost at Sector I-11, also known as the Aster 9 station. Apparently, a small human delegation had sent a polite request to dock and discuss mutual interests. Nobody knew if that was a prelude to trade, exploration, or invasion. One by one, representatives rose to voice their concerns. A reptilian figure claimed the humans consumed the marrow of their children to gain superhuman strength. A floating cephalopod insisted they could transform their limbs at will, morphing into unstoppable beasts if threatened. An insectoid general called for an immediate ban on any contact. The debate grew more hysterical with each passing moment. Aradella quietly listened. Sildorians were known for their calm demeanor, but even she felt a trickle of apprehension run along her scalp ridges. The fact that these bizarre rumors found so many willing believers indicated the depth of the galaxy's paranoia. Eventually, the High Chancellor hammered his staff for silence. "We have decided," he intoned, "to dispatch a select group to meet these humans at Aster 9. Our intelligence suggests that their vessel is lightly armed, if armed at all. A small diplomatic mission shall suffice." An uneasy silence followed. Volunteering for such a mission seemed tantamount to risking one's life. Who would be so bold or foolish? Several representatives glanced at each other, shifting in their hover chairs or flexing their tendrils in discomfort. To Aradella's surprise, her name was proposed. In the swirl of hurried whispering, she caught a snippet from one of the senior Sildorians. "She's bright, but inexperienced. However, her presence might calm things. Sildorians are well respected for their neutrality." Before she could fully react, the High Chancellor's staff rang out. "Representative Aradella Varks, you will accompany the team. You have shown promise, and we believe you will uphold the dignity of the Assembly." The murmurs grew louder, and Aradella felt her throat tighten. She nodded, uncertain but determined, and accepted the directive. After the meeting adjourned, an aide hurried to her side, thrusting a data tablet into her hands. It contained her official assignment, along with a wealth of rumor-laden intelligence about humans. She spent the evening in her temporary quarters, reading about potential human aggressions, their supposed superpowers, their violent histories, and contradictory statements about their achievements. Instead of clarity, the documents only gave her a deeper sense of confusion. Some claimed humans were barely surviving, while others declared them unstoppable conquerors who had already subdued their entire solar system through unscrupulous means. Exhausted, she slept fitfully, with half-formed nightmares of screaming bipeds and swirling starlight. The next morning, she boarded a council vessel bound for Aster 9. An eclectic group joined her, a shy aquatic counselor from Torshaw, who traveled in a hover tank filled with fluid, a bulky, red-skinned Vranian who insisted on carrying a massive ceremonial mace, a slender, telepathic Kirill who disliked speaking aloud, and two others who mostly kept to themselves. None of them seemed comfortable with each other. Aradella wondered if that was how humans traveled, on small ships forced to coexist. Did that necessity breed cooperation or constant strife? As the council ship approached Aster 9, a rusted, uneven station at the galaxy's edge, Aradella noted that the docking protocols appeared haphazard. Lights flickered around the station's perimeter, and the automated greeting was garbled. The interior docking bay, once they disembarked, was nearly deserted. According to the station's caretaker, an elderly Brix named Godel, dozens of merchants and travelers had fled upon hearing that humans were coming. The few who remained had locked themselves in their quarters, refusing to emerge until the threat passed. The caretaker apologized for the dire state of the station. "I cannot guarantee your safety," he wheezed, adjusting the respirator on his muzzle. "Rumors have a way of turning into reality in these parts." Aradella gave him a polite nod, though her own fear crept up. Why did they all hide? Had they truly witnessed something about humans that terrified them? The caretaker looked at her uncertainly, then shrugged and shuffled away, presumably to monitor some failing system. They arrived at a large reception area. It was supposed to be an official greeting chamber, but many of the decorative banners had been torn down and half the seats were overturned. The lights glowed a sickly yellow, highlighting every scratch on the metal walls. Aradella's small group of delegates huddled together, each scanning the area for signs of treachery. A droning alarm sounded in the distance, announcing that a small vessel had docked at one of the station's secondary bays. Aradella's hearts beat faster. Sildorians had two hearts, so anxiety often came with a double pounding. She smoothed her robe and steeled herself. The others whispered. "This must be them," said the Torshan counselor from within his water tank, voice muffled by the fluid. The Vranian gripped his mace. "If they try anything, they will taste this," he growled, knuckles whitening. From a corridor to the left, 3 humans emerged. They stood on 2 legs, covered in fairly simple clothing that seemed practical rather than ceremonial. One, a man with light brown hair and keen gray eyes, stepped forward. He introduced himself as Captain Ryan Walcott of Earth's Diplomatic Service. Beside him was a woman of medium height, hair braided, wearing an insignia that labeled her as DR. Naomi Park, a specialist of some kind. Flanking them was a lean, dark-haired individual with sharp eyes and a posture that radiated readiness. Lieutenant Sergio Reyes, their security officer. Aradella drew in a breath. The humans were shorter than she expected, but moved with a certain coiled energy, as though every muscle was prepared to act. She noticed how their gazes traveled across the chamber, evaluating potential threats. Reyes in particular had a hand near his side, where some sort of compact device presumably rested. Some of the other delegates seemed to recoil, but Aradella found no overt menace in the humans' expressions, just wariness. Captain Walcott spoke in a formal, yet friendly voice, greeting them in the galactic standard language that most species use for diplomacy. "We appreciate the opportunity to meet with you here on Aster 9. My crew and I come in peace to discuss the possibility of trade and cooperation." His greeting was polished, presumably rehearsed to dispel fear. Yet a slight tension in his shoulders betrayed that he was all too aware of the hostile atmosphere. The Vranian delegate took a step forward, towering over Walcott by nearly 2 heads. You come with sweet words, but we have heard tales of your brutality. Why should we believe you? His voice echoed in the near-empty hall. Dr. Park responded gently that those stories were exaggerated. She pointed out that humans had many historical conflicts, but had made significant strides toward global unity. This was met with suspicious glares. Aradella steeled herself and introduced the delegation. She tried to keep her tone steady, well aware of the flicker of fear in her colleague's eyes. Barely had the introductions concluded when a shrill alarm echoed through the station speakers. The caretaker's trembling voice came through distorted comm channels. Attention, Aster, 9 is on lockdown. Intruders in the maintenance wing, possibly armed. All non-essential personnel seek shelter. A second alarm soon followed, indicating a security breach near the main reactor. Aradella's mind raced. Intruders? Pirates? Some other group that had chosen this exact moment to strike? The Vranian cursed under his breath. The Torshan counselor sloshed in panic. The Kirill telepath frowned deeply, picking up mental distress signals from all around the station. Reyes and Walcott exchanged meaningful looks. The captain turned to Aradella. Representative, do you have a station security detail we can coordinate with? She shook her head, feeling oddly at a loss. The caretaker is the only authority figure here, and it's not exactly well guarded. Fear prickled her spine. She didn't want to admit that the station was effectively lawless. Walcott's gaze moved around the room. Then we'll have to handle it ourselves, or at least see what we can do to keep everyone safe. The other delegates were torn. Half of them believed this incursion might be orchestrated by the humans themselves, a cunning ploy to demonstrate power. But Aradella, seeing the tension in Walcott's jaw, suspected otherwise. The humans seemed genuinely concerned. There was something about their posture. They were used to dealing with adversity. As a group, they proceeded through flickering corridors, stumbling when the gravity fields fluctuated. Metal scaffolding lined the walls in certain sections, revealing the station's advanced age and disrepair. Aradella found it hard not to let her imagination run wild. Was there an entire army of invisible assailants waiting to pounce? She tried to keep her breathing even, to embody the calm diplomacy her mentors had taught her. They reached a bulkhead near the reactor wing, but the door refused to open. On the control panel, an ominous red indicator pulsed. Walcott gestured to Reyes, who pulled out a small cylindrical device. It emitted a faint hum as he attached it to the panel. Within seconds, the door slid open. The delegates looked on with a mixture of awe and wariness. Human infiltration device, the Vranian muttered. They truly can breach anything. The corridor beyond was dimly lit, pipes hissing with steam. Near the far end, the caretaker Godel was pinned against a wall by 2 masked figures clad in black body armor. The caretaker's respirator hissed in distress. Aradella's stomach lurched. The masked figures spotted them and raised what looked like energy rifles. Before Aradella or the other delegates could react, Reyes aimed a compact sidearm and fired 2 precise, low-intensity pulses that knocked both intruders backward. The abrupt flash of light dazzled Aradella's eyes. One intruder staggered, dropping his rifle. The other tried to aim again, but Reyes was too fast. A second blast forced him to retreat behind a cluster of crates. In the confusion, Godel slumped to the floor, gasping for air. Aradella darted forward, helping the caretaker reattach his malfunctioning respirator. The others rushed in. The masked intruders fled down a side corridor. From the quick glimpse Aradella had, they looked nothing like humans. The structure of their armor suggested a variety of species might be among them. They left behind a small device, some sort of disruptor, that continued to beep ominously. Dr. Park knelt, scanning Godel with a handheld medical unit. She offered him a container of clear liquid that, she explained, contained universal stabilizing compounds for respiratory distress. The caretaker gulped it down. A mixture of relief and astonishment flickered in his eyes. Humans had apparently come prepared for a range of alien physiology. I don't know who they are, Godel stammered. They came out of nowhere, demanding access to the main reactor. Claimed they had important business. When I refused, his voice trembled. Aradella tried to piece this together. Could they be local criminals? She asked. Reyes shook his head. That gear is top tier. They're definitely not random lowlifes. Walcott examined the disruptor they left. This looks like a partial station override device. They might be trying to sabotage systems or blackmail the station. If they take control of the reactor, they can do anything from shutting off life support to threatening meltdown. A sense of dread took hold of Aradella. This was more than an opportunistic heist. Someone wanted leverage, perhaps not just against Aster 9, but also against the council delegation and these humans. The caretaker coughed, regaining some composure. I heard them say something about ensuring the entire galaxy sees humans as the real threat, he whispered. Could that mean they're trying to frame you? He glanced nervously at Walcott, who stood with parted lips, alarmed by the possibility. The group paused near a flickering holomap. It showed the station's labyrinth of corridors and the location of the main reactor, perched precariously on the station's lowest deck. The Torshan counselor whimpered from his fluid tank. This is madness. We should evacuate. The Vranian brandished his mace. Evacuate where? Our ship is still locked in the docking clamps. We can't jump to hyperspace from inside the station, and if these intruders seize the reactor, we're trapped. The Kiral telepath's antennae twitched. Scifi. It is strong. Not only from us, but from them too. They are determined, but they are terrified of something. Aradella took a moment to steel herself. She locked eyes with Walcott. If you truly came in peace, now would be the time to prove it. Help us stop these intruders. If we fail, the station could be destroyed. Walcott nodded, jaw set. We'll do what we can. Reyes seemed less enthusiastic. He was scanning the corridor behind them, presumably waiting for more hostiles. Dr. Park gave a firm nod. Aradella could see tension in the woman's posture, but also resolve. Leaving the caretaker in a safer side chamber, they moved deeper into Aster 9. The corridors became narrower, the lighting sporadic. Occasional arcs of electricity cracked across exposed cables. The station's groans seemed to intensify, as though it was on the brink of total malfunction. Eventually, they reached a large sealed blast door marked reactor access. Once again, the door was locked from the other side. But from behind, it came a series of muffled clangs and mechanical whirs. Reyes pressed his ear to the metal. They're tampering with something heavy, possibly hooking up specialized equipment. The Vranian frowned. We should just break through. I can tear this door off its hinges with enough time. Walcott raised a hand. That might trigger a defensive reaction. Let's see if we can isolate their location or jam their attempts. Dr. Park pulled out a small data pad, connecting to the station's archaic system through an external port. She typed furiously, trying to override the override. Aradella felt the suffocating weight of tension. She realized her own hearts hammered so loudly that she could almost hear them. Trying to maintain composure, she glanced at the humans again. Despite the situation, they retained a certain steadiness, a controlled focus that mystified her. Sildorians prided themselves on calm rationality, but right now she felt anything but calm. In contrast, the humans, fearful or not, did not freeze or panic. Dr. Park cursed under her breath. They have a block on the primary system. I can't break it from here. Aradella turned to the telepathic Kiral. Is there another route to the reactor, or something we can do to catch them off guard? The Kiral closed its eyes, scanning mentally. Yes, it said after a moment. There's a crawlway for maintenance cables. But it's cramped and might be booby-trapped. Walcott nodded. No time to waste. Let's split. Some of us create a diversion here. The rest go through that maintenance route. The Torshan counselor, whose watery tank was too large for a tight crawlway, volunteered to remain behind with the Vranian as a decoy. The Kiral also stayed, focusing its telepathic abilities to create mental confusion for anyone behind the door. That left Aradella and the humans. She inhaled shakily, wishing she felt braver. The path to the crawlway was down another corridor, behind a half-collapsed section of the station. They had to navigate fallen beams, blinking hazard lights, and swirling dust that irritated her lungs. Dr. Park offered her a small filtration mask, having noticed her coughing. Aradella accepted it gratefully, again reminded of how thoroughly prepared the humans were. They found an access hatch in the ceiling. Reyes boosted himself up first, testing the rungs. "Looks secure enough," he said. Walcott followed, then Dr. Park, and finally Aradella. The crawlway was barely wide enough for them to crawl on hands and knees. Tangled wires and tubes ran along the walls, and the air was hot, tinged with ozone. Every few meters, a vent hissed, releasing bursts of steam or coolant. Aradella had to fight claustrophobia, her heart still pounding. She marveled again. The humans pressed on with unwavering determination. Walcott led the way, occasionally checking a small handheld scanner that beeped softly. They reached a junction and had to guess which branch led toward the reactor. Walcott's scanner indicated an elevated temperature to the left. "Could be the reactor side," he whispered. Reyes took point, weapon drawn. They crept along. After about 10 minutes of tense movement, they heard voices echoing. The accent was unrecognizable. Not humans. Not any of the delegates. Possibly the same masked intruders. Words drifted through: stabilize the device, meltdown, blame the humans, payment guaranteed. Aradella's blood ran cold. She realized that these intruders were orchestrating a disaster that would implicate the human delegation. That must be the plan: detonate or severely damage the reactor, kill or trap the delegates, then stage evidence that the humans had done it. It would confirm every rumor about human savagery, even if a few survivors managed to escape. It would be their word against the carefully planted proof. Reyes gestured for silence, then eased the hatch open a crack. They peered into a small antechamber connecting to the reactor core. A half-dozen masked figures worked on a complicated apparatus. One typed at a console, while another brandished a rifle, presumably standing guard. Overhead, lights flickered. The swirling gloom made it hard to see. Reyes muttered, "I count 6. Possibly more in the other room. If we rush in, we need to act fast." Dr. Park bit her lip. "We might cause them to trigger the meltdown prematurely." Walcott exhaled. "We have to be careful. Maybe we can sabotage their device from the station's side." Aradella tried to recall the technical schematics. "If we get direct access to the reactor's central control node, we can shut it down before their meltdown sequence completes. But it would cut life support and cause a chain reaction of minor blackouts across the station. We need to restore it quickly." Walcott nodded. "Do you think you can manage that?" She hesitated, then recalled that she had studied basic engineering in her youth. She might stand a chance, especially if Dr. Park assisted. Reyes proposed he would create a distraction to draw away the armed intruders. Walcott offered to back him up. Aradella felt a surge of anxiety. "That's too risky," she whispered. Walcott locked eyes with her. "Everything about this is risky. We have no choice." Their plan formed quickly. Reyes would slide down through the hatch, lob a flash device to blind the intruders. Walcott would follow, focusing on disarming them or knocking them back. Meanwhile, Aradella and Dr. Park would sneak around to the main console. If they managed to reach it, they could input the shutdown code for the reactor's primary feed. It was a desperate strategy, but the only one they had. Aradella's breath came in rapid bursts. A Sildorian was never supposed to be in a direct fight, let alone sabotage a meltdown. She forced her trembling limbs to obey, reminded herself of her duty to protect the station and the delegates. The humans moved with quiet resolve. She saw lines of tension in Walcott's face, but also a grim determination that steadied her own nerves. Reyes dropped into the antechamber with agile grace, instantly rolling behind a crate. A bright flash erupted, accompanied by a thunderous crack. The masked figures shouted in alarm, their movements frantic in the flickering light. Walcott leapt in next, sending 2 precise blasts from his sidearm to disorient the nearest foes. Aradella followed Dr. Park, who moved surprisingly quickly toward the console near the far corner. The air smelled of burnt circuitry and fear. One of the intruders fired a wild shot, sizzling the wall inches from Aradella's shoulder. Her heart's nearly stopped. Dr. Park reached the console, hooking up her datapad in a flurry of motion. Aradella typed the sequence she remembered from the station system. An error message popped up, accompanied by an ominous beep. They've locked it. Some kind of encryption, Dr. Park muttered, starting a bypass routine. Meanwhile, the masked assailants recovered from the initial shock. They scattered behind crates and metal pillars. Walcott ducked behind a structural beam, returning fire with short bursts. Reyes advanced methodically, weaving across the chamber. The intruders, apparently more than 6 in number, retaliated. Blue-white beams of energy streaked back and forth. One intruder, presumably the leader, shouted commands. Something about forcing a meltdown within 5 minutes. Aradella's sweat beaded on her brow. Dr. Park cursed. It's going too slowly. I need another minute. A stray blast struck near their console, showering sparks. Aradella's 2 hearts thudded in terror, but she pressed on, verifying the override codes. We have to hurry, she gasped. She glanced over her shoulder at Walcott, who pinned down a pair of attackers with an almost uncanny calmness. A sizzling energy bolt clipped Reyes's shoulder plate, spinning him momentarily. He let out a hiss of pain, but stayed standing, returning fire. Another masked figure collapsed, stunned or worse. The rest began retreating toward the reactor core, presumably trying to finalize the meltdown device. Aradella had to wonder what twisted ideology or payroll had led them to risk their lives for such sabotage. The console beeped. Dr. Park exclaimed, "We're in." Aradella swiftly navigated the interface, swiping to the reactor's main feed. She typed commands to shut down the magnetic containment. That would normally be catastrophic, but the meltdown device presumably relied on a specific internal pressure. If they released the pressure in a controlled manner, it would stall or disrupt the meltdown. A new alarm shrieked, and lights flickered red. The masked leader realized what was happening, yelling for someone to stop them. 2 armed figures rushed the consoles. Position. Walcott intercepted one with a flying tackle. The other aimed at Aradella. She froze, caught in the intruder's sights, mind reeling. In that instant, Dr. Park jumped forward, smashing her datapad against the attacker's hand. The energy blast went wild, scorching the ceiling. The attacker staggered back, and Aradella had enough time to complete the override sequence. The entire station groaned. A low rumble swept through the deck plates. For a horrifying second, Aradella thought the meltdown might have accelerated. Then the reactor core's alarms shifted to a cautionary tone, signifying partial shutdown. The meltdown device beeped in rapid succession, apparently destabilized. They're losing their chance, Reyes shouted, throwing himself behind a console to avoid the last few shots. The masked leader let out a cry of rage and desperation. Retreat. We'll regroup. With that, the intruders fled into a side corridor. Walcott sprang forward, but it was too late to catch them. Dr. Park panted, clutching a bruise on her elbow. Reyes grunted in pain, pressing a hand to his scorched shoulder. Aradella's mind swam with relief, but her entire body trembled. They had averted catastrophe, for now. Through the console, Dr. Park confirmed the meltdown was canceled. The reactor was in a precarious low-power state, but it was stable. In the aftermath, Godel arrived with a few newly mustered station security drones. They surveyed the damage and tended to the wounded. Reyes insisted his injury was superficial, but Dr. Park insisted on a quick scan. Meanwhile, Walcott studied a piece of armor left behind by one of the intruders. He pried open a small compartment, revealing the insignia of the Zariad Syndicate, a notorious criminal organization rumored to supply arms to anyone willing to pay enough. Aradella's stomach churned. She had heard of the Zariad Syndicate. They were not just criminals. They were known to manipulate entire star systems. Godel, still shaky, explained that he'd overheard references to a buyer high in the Galactic Assembly. The intruders apparently wanted to stage a destructive incident that would be blamed on humans, thus justifying extreme measures against Earth's delegation. Aradella exchanged a look with Walcott, whose face darkened. Someone in the assembly must want humans out of the picture. Considering the rampant fear swirling around humanity, it was easy to see how the galaxy could be manipulated. Over the next few hours, they stabilized the reactor, cleared out pockets of sabotage, and re-established partial communications with the outside. However, the Zariad Syndicate had planted sophisticated jammers across the station, making it difficult to broadcast a clear message. News of the incident would be delayed, giving the conspirators time to spin the narrative. Aradella felt an urgent need to warn the assembly that the real threat came not from humans, but from within their own ranks. Aster 9's caretaker mustered up the courage to hold a small, impromptu meeting in the battered reception hall. The other delegates gathered, some of them bandaged from minor injuries. The Torshan counselor floated nervously. The Vranian looked frustrated that he had not been in the thick of the fight, and the Kirill telepath wore an expression of solemn understanding. Walcott, Reyes, and Dr. Park stood side by side, an unspoken solidarity connecting them. Aradella faced the group, clearing her throat. "We have prevented a disaster," she began, her voice echoing in the gloom. "But these intruders could return with more forces, or they may choose a different tactic. They are well-funded and well-organized. We must find a way to get a secure transmission out to the assembly and expose what's happened." She paused, her gaze drifting to the humans. "We also need to address the underlying issue. Someone has tried to exploit our fear of humans to sow discord." Several delegates exchanged uneasy glances. The Torshan counselor spoke up, watery voice trembling. "But we do fear them. Everyone does. Are we simply to ignore the centuries of rumors about their destructive capabilities?" Aradella considered how to respond, but Walcott cut in gently. "We don't deny our history of violence or mistakes. But this galaxy is vast, and humanity has come a long way. If you judge us by the worst we've done, or by unverified stories, then you're playing right into the hands of those who seek to manipulate you." At that point, the Kirill telepath folded its antennae. "I sense that the humans are indeed afraid. Their hearts race with anxiety, yet they do not succumb to it. They use it to focus. This confounds me." The telepath turned to Reyes in particular. "Why aren't you paralyzed by fear? Surely you sense the danger." Reyes stood straight, shoulders tense, but he answered in a measured tone. "Of course I'm afraid. Only a fool would be fearless in a place like this. Fear keeps me sharp. It reminds me what's at stake, and it drives me to act before it's too late." Aradella felt a chill run through her at his words. It was not the bravado of someone claiming they were fearless. It was the admission of fear as a tool, a companion. She realized that the stories about humans lacking fear were untrue. They felt it deeply, but they approached it differently. Her own hearts pounded. She thought back to every rumor, every frantic piece of intelligence that portrayed humans as unstoppable beasts. Perhaps they were unstoppable precisely because they acknowledged fear yet pressed onward. She found herself whispering, "Why aren't you scared, human?" The question spilled out, almost involuntary, into the hush of the moment. Dr. Park gave a wry smile. "We are scared, but not in the way the galaxy expects. We've learned that fear can be harnessed for survival, for growth, for innovation." Aradella absorbed those words, a subtle shiver crossing her skin. In that instant, she understood what made humans truly formidable. Not their rumored powers, but their capacity to transform fear into something resilient and adaptable. Another alarm shattered the silence. On a flickering display screen, they saw a small craft docking at another bay. Was it more intruders? Or had reinforcements arrived? Station scans were inconclusive. Godel coughed. "We can't tell if it's friend or foe. The jammers are still partially active." Without hesitation, the Vranian delegate bellowed, "We must confront them." Reyes checked his sidearm, exchanging a nod with Walcott. Aradella found her own hand trembling at her side. She forced herself to steel her nerves. This station had become a battleground for truth and deception alike. They hurried through the corridors again, stepping over debris and darting past compromised bulkheads. The caretaker's voice crackled through the overhead comm. Whoever they are, they're using override codes to bypass certain locks. They might already have access to the commerce deck. The group arrived to see half a dozen new figures in sleek, black armor. The insignia left no doubt. More agents of the Zariad Syndicate. They carried themselves with a chilling confidence, each armed with advanced weaponry. The Syndicate commander, a tall figure with a ridged helmet, scanned the group with barely disguised contempt. "We have orders to secure this station and everyone in it. Surrender. We only want to arrange a suitable demonstration of so-called human treachery." His voice reverberated with a mechanical edge. Aradella's mind spun. They were so brazen about it. That meant they were certain the assembly would accept whatever story they concocted. Fear flared anew. If the delegates here died, the official record would say humans slaughtered them all. Before anyone could protest, the commander raised a hand. Two armed subordinates marched forward, aiming rifles. Reyes stepped in front of DR. Park and Walcott, raising his sidearm in a protective stance. The tension rose to a razor's edge. The Kirill telepath tried to project confusion, but one of the Syndicate soldiers wore a specialized neural dampener, thwarting psychic interference. The standoff froze everyone in place. Aradella's hearts galloped. She remembered the meltdown scenario they had narrowly prevented. She pictured the entire station turned into a tomb of twisted metal. Summoning a surge of courage, she spoke up, voice shaking yet determined. "This ends now. The galaxy will know the truth about your manipulations, about how you exploit fear to gain power." Her defiance drew the commander's attention. He gazed at her, unimpressed. "Foolish Sildorian," he sneered. "You do not understand fear. You cower before it, and that is why we always win." Reyes fired the first shot, a bright streak that forced the Syndicate soldiers to scatter. The delegates ducked behind cover. Walcott advanced with a short-range device that crackled with electricity, disabling one soldier's rifle. The commerce deck erupted in chaos. Shelves and containers toppled. The Syndicate commander roared orders to flank the group. The delegates, far from trained combatants, scrambled to avoid the barrage of energy beams. Aradella ducked behind a metal crate, biting her lip so hard she tasted blood. Reyes darted around a corner, exchanging rapid fire. His face was set with fierce concentration. DR. Park crawled along the floor, retrieving some sort of improvised device from a supply cabinet. Aradella recognized it as a portable shield generator that the caretaker had mentioned. She turned it on, producing a shimmering barrier around them. It crackled under the impact of Syndicate blasts. The telepath cowered behind a column, trying to muster enough mental energy to sow confusion among the attackers. Under the protective shield, Aradella realized they couldn't just wait. The shield would fail eventually. Summoning resolve, she scanned the deck for a way out. If they made it to the station's secondary communications array, maybe they could call for outside help. She caught Walcott's eye and gestured toward a door marked "Com Access." He nodded slightly, gesturing for Reyes to draw fire so they could slip away. Reyes sprang from the shielded zone, laying down suppressive blasts. The intruders turned their rifles toward him. Walcott and DR. Park rushed after Aradella, diving behind crates and walls, inching closer to the Com Access door. A hail of sparks rained down as overhead panels were hit. One shot ricocheted, nearly striking DR. Park's leg. Walcott grabbed her arm, pulling her aside just in time. They reached the door, and Aradella slapped the panel. A beep of denial. Locked. She saw the bright glint in Walcott's eyes. "Let me," he said, pulling out a compact hacking tool. Within seconds, the door slid open. They stumbled inside the cramped corridor leading to the secondary communications hub. Lights flickered ominously. Power fluctuations from the sabotage had left the station's internal systems in disarray. Walcott checked a readout. "We still have partial comm capacity. If we can broadcast a signal off the station, we might get reinforcements or at least inform the assembly." DR. Park nodded, taking out her datapad. She linked it to a battered console. Lines of code scrolled across the screen. Aradella stood guard, heart thumping in her throat. The door behind them hissed as Reyes burst through, followed by the telepathic Kirill. The Torshan counselor and Vranian delegate were still in the commerce deck, pinned down by syndicate forces. Reyes's face was drawn with pain. They're fighting as best they can. We have to hurry. The Kirill pressed against the wall, antennae trembling. I try to disrupt the attackers mentally, but the dampeners are too strong. I sense unyielding resolve and deep fear. Fear of failing their employer. Who is their employer? Aradella asked through clenched teeth. The Kirill shook its head. I can't see. They are layered in mental blocks. That revelation made Aradella shudder. If someone in the assembly was manipulating all this, they had formidable resources. A beep from DR. Hart's pad caught their attention. She exhaled in frustration. They're flooding the station with interference. I can't get a stable channel. We might manage a short burst message, but no guarantee it'll reach far. Walcott considered that, eyes flicking up to Reyes. We have to try. If we can at least get a partial warning out, it might prompt the assembly to investigate. Reyes nodded and took position near the door, anticipating syndicate assault. DR. Park typed swiftly, scanning frequencies, try to locate any gap in the jamming. Aradella, her voice trembling with adrenaline, explained the dire situation in a quick monologue. Zariad syndicate, sabotage, attempt, meltdown, pinned down, manipulated fear of humans. She repeated these key points. DR. Park set the console to broadcast on a wide array of channels. Suddenly, the door behind them exploded inward. Reyes dived aside as shards of metal flew. A syndicate soldier rushed in, brandishing a massive energy blade crackling with blue fire. He lunged at Walcott, who managed to roll away just in time, though the blade scorched his left sleeve. The telepath cried out, trying to mount a mental assault. The soldier wore a dampener, rendering it ineffective. Aradella's mind screamed. She grabbed a piece of broken conduit, brandishing it like a crude staff. The soldier kicked it aside with contempt, turning on her. She froze, fear overwhelming her. She half expected the humans to intervene, but Reyes was grappling with another intruder who had just burst in. DR. Park scrambled for cover. Time seemed to slow as the soldier raised the crackling blade. Aradella braced for the blow, a chilling wave of despair gripping her. Then, from behind the soldier, Walcott sprang up, slamming a stunned baton into the gap under the soldier's arm. Electricity arced. The soldier convulsed, dropping the blade with a loud clatter. Aradella staggered back, her heart's pounding so violently she thought she might faint. A triumphant beep sounded on DR. Park's console, followed by a burst of static-laced audio that might have been a partial message going out. She turned to Walcott with breathless hope. I think it went through, at least partially. Someone out there should have caught the signal. Reyes knocked the second intruder unconscious with a well-aimed strike. Then, in the tense quiet that followed, they heard distant shouts. More syndicate agents, or perhaps the Torshan and Vranian delegates, had regrouped. The entire station was a patchwork of skirmishes. Walcott helped Aradella up, scanning her for injuries. She felt tears pricking at the corners of her eyes, not from physical pain, but from the surge of terror that had nearly paralyzed her. She understood in that moment the difference between her and the humans. They all felt fear, but the humans used it to fuel action rather than letting it. Lock them in place. She swallowed the lump in her throat, whispering, "Thank you." Walcott nodded, face grimy with sweat and dust. An echoing announcement blared across the station. The caretaker had successfully re-established partial control of the intercom. Syndicate forces, we have reinforcements inbound. Cease hostilities and surrender. The voice wavered, but it was a sign that the caretaker was no longer helpless. The new message repeated, and eventually the blasts and screams around the station lessened. It seemed the Syndicate's plan was unraveling. Without control of the meltdown scenario, and with the possibility that the assembly would soon learn the truth, they had lost their greatest leverage. Aradella suspected many of them would retreat to avoid capture. Within an hour, the delegates regrouped in the battered commerce deck. Syndicate mercenaries had either fled to their ship or been neutralized. Reyes, Walcott, and Dr. Park were hailed as heroes by some, though others still regarded them with the same old suspicion. Aradella assured everyone that the meltdown was averted and that an emergency broadcast had likely left the station. Those signals were scrambled. The caretaker believed repairs could be made to fully restore external communication within another day. Aradella's priority became crafting a thorough report for the Assembly, detailing how the Zariad Syndicate had tried to exploit the galaxy's fear of humans. But her mind was heavy with the knowledge that someone on the inside had hired them. She did not know who or why, but she suspected it revolved around maintaining power and stifling any unpredictable element. Humans were deemed too adaptable, too disruptive. Perhaps certain factions in the Assembly preferred stable stagnation to growth, even if that stagnation was built on fear. When communications were finally restored, Aradella's report made it to the Assembly, along with testimony from the other delegates. Videos of the sabotage attempts, the meltdown device, and the masked intruders wearing the Syndicate emblem poured in. Many were shocked to see how close the station came to total destruction. News spread like wildfire that humans had fought alongside the delegates to save Aster 9. In the days that followed, various representatives arrived to examine the damage and question witnesses. A formal inquiry began, seeking to root out any conspirators within the Assembly. Aradella found herself at the center of the storm, lauded for her bravery in preventing a meltdown and forging a new understanding with the humans. More delegates wanted to meet them, to see if they really were the unstoppable monsters rumors claimed, or if they were simply another species trying to find their place in the galaxy. A special session of the Galactic Assembly convened. Aradella stood before the gathering, her robes carefully mended but still bearing traces of soot. Captain Walcott, Lieutenant Reyes, and Dr. Park accompanied her, each wearing respectful but simple garments and standing with quiet composure. The hall was filled with delegates from countless worlds, their eyes reflecting a mix of skepticism, curiosity, and lingering fear. Aradella spoke in a clear voice, recounting the events on Aster 9. She described the meltdown plot, the deception that aimed to turn the galaxy against humanity. She offered evidence from station logs and security recordings. Then she turned to the humans and spoke of how they had risked their lives to protect the station. A hush settled over the chamber. Perhaps never before had a Sildorian publicly defended humans so passionately. When the floor opened for questions, many delegates probed the humans with inquiries about their technology, their warlike history, and their rumored unstoppable adaptability. Walcott answered patiently, acknowledging humanity's past mistakes while emphasizing their capacity to learn, unite, and negotiate. Reyes stood behind him, stoic and guarded, while Dr. Park explained the scientific achievements that had propelled humanity into space, including the medical knowledge that had helped them save lives on the station. An elderly Dravik representative with shimmering blue scales rose. You speak of fear as though you embrace it. Why? Fear leads to panic, to violence. Is that not the hallmark of your species' darkest eras? The question rang out across the silent assembly. Dr. Park glanced at Walcott, who inclined his head toward Reyes. The lieutenant stepped forward, scanning the crowd. His face was etched with resolve. We humans spent millennia trying to conquer fear through violence, through denial. Eventually, we realized fear is not something you defeat. It is something you carry with you. Instead of letting it swallow us, we turn it into an engine for innovation. Our greatest achievements, medicine, flight, faster-than-light travel, came because we were afraid of what would happen if we didn't push ourselves further. That's who we are. A ripple of conversation swept through the chamber. Aradella, standing beside them, felt that same chilling awe she had on the station. Fear as fuel, not as an anchor. She recalled how close she had been to death beneath that intruder's blade, and how Walcott had saved her. She realized that in that moment, Fear had driven her to do what was necessary to save the station. Maybe fear was universal, yet species responded differently. In the aftermath of the testimonies, the Assembly voted to launch an investigation into the Zariad Syndicate's infiltration and any Assembly members colluding with them. Many who had hysterically opposed humanity now cautiously admitted the possibility that humans were not the monstrous threat they had believed. Others still insisted that humanity was a wild card, too unpredictable to be trusted. Regardless, the official stance softened from immediate hostility to guarded engagement. Following the heated session, a reception was held. The humans mingled with various delegates, though the atmosphere remained tense. Aradella drifted to the giant panoramic window overlooking the cosmic tapestry of stars. She felt a presence behind her. Walcott joined her, posture relaxed despite the swirl of delegates. She broke the silence. "I never knew one could harness fear like you do. I was raised to suppress it, to hide it behind a facade of control. But you confront it head on." He regarded the stars. "We learned the hard way that hiding from fear doesn't make it go away. It just gives it power. Maybe that's why so many species find us unsettling." She turned to him. "You realize now that many still doubt your intentions." He nodded, a slight smile. "I expect as much. Trust has to be earned." Reyes and Dr. Park approached, exchanging subtle nods with Aradella. The four of them stood in contemplative silence, watching distant galaxies shimmer. Word of the events on Aster 9 continued to spread. Some star systems reached out to Earth, curious about what humans could offer. Others tightened their borders, convinced that the humans were manipulative upstarts. But a tide had turned, and it was no longer acceptable to blindly brand humanity as savage. The seeds of cooperation were planted. Aradella made the journey back to Sildoria, where she was welcomed with a mixture of admiration and concern. Her superiors questioned her closeness to the humans, worried she might be under their influence. She calmly recounted the sabotage, the meltdown threat, the syndicate's role, and the humans' bravery. Over time, her testimony convinced many Sildorians that dialogue was worth pursuing. Fear still lingered in the hearts of many, but it was no longer a paralyzing dread. A few weeks later, a small human vessel arrived in Sildorian space. Captain Walcott led a brief meeting with Sildorian scholars and engineers, exchanging data about reactor safety measures that might prevent future sabotage attempts. Meanwhile, Dr. Park shared medical advancements that could assist aquatic races suffering from space travel ailments. Lieutenant Reyes mostly kept to the shadows, quietly ensuring security, but Aradella caught him once or twice gazing at the marble pillars of the grand Sildorian complexes in quiet wonder. At the end of the visit, Aradella accompanied the humans back to the landing platform. Her peers had mostly grown used to the sight of humans by then, though they still cast wary glances. As the humans prepared to depart, Aradella found herself asking Walcott, "What if the conspirators come after you again? You've made enemies." He shrugged, a faint smile touching his lips. "We've learned to handle enemies throughout our history. What terrifies us is the thought that we might never overcome our own flaws. That's why we keep trying, keep expanding. We take fear with us wherever we go." Aradella recalled the question that had haunted her since their first meeting. "Why aren't you scared, human?" Now she knew the answer was not that they lacked fear. They felt it deeply. Yet their willingness to press on, carrying fear like a torch against the darkness, was what made them so unpredictable and, in a sense, awe-inspiring. She touched her own chest, feeling the steady drumming of her two hearts. "Perhaps that's your greatest power," she murmured, "and the rest of the galaxy is only beginning to see it." Walcott inclined his head in acknowledgement. "We're grateful to you, Representative Varks. Without your voice in the Assembly, who knows what disaster might have befallen us all," Reyes added. "And thanks for not letting your fear paralyze you. That meltdown would have cooked us alive if you'd hesitated." Dr. Park nodded, a gentle smile. Aradella realized with a wistful ache that she would miss their curious mixture of intensity and warmth. The humans boarded their vessel, thrusters humming in the crisp Sildorian atmosphere. Aradella stepped back as the craft lifted off, kicking up swirling dust. Motes. She shielded her eyes, reflecting on how different her perspective was from the day she first left for Aster 9. Then, all she had known of humans were rumors. Now, she had seen them in the crucible of crisis. Perhaps the Assembly would learn to recognize the nuance she had discovered. Perhaps, given time, synergy could blossom into genuine friendship. But she was under no illusions. The conspirators in the Assembly were not eradicated. The Zariad Syndicate remained at large, lurking in the shadows of the galaxy's fringes. More attempts might be made to vilify humans or any species deemed too different. The seeds of fear were easy to sow. Yet standing in the airy courtyard with the echoes of starship engines fading overhead, Aradella felt an unwavering resolve bloom in her chest. She had faced death, felt the chilling paralyzation of fear, and learned that one could still move forward despite shaking limbs. She would serve as a liaison, bridging the gap between Earth and the Assembly, unraveling the tangled web of prejudice and manipulation. She would encourage others to see beyond the monstrous tales, to judge humans by their actions, not by rumors. She would stand by them if more sabotage attempts occurred. Somewhere in her mind, the question repeated itself. Why aren't you scared, human? And every time she recalled their resolute answers, she felt her own courage sharpen. In the weeks and months that followed, the inquiry into the sabotage at Aster 9 uncovered evidence implicating a small but influential faction in the Assembly that had financed the Syndicate's operation. Indictments were handed down, and the galaxy witnessed a rare moment of introspection. The very institution that prided itself on unity had harbored a cabal bent on shaping galactic policy through stage terror. Trust was shaken, yet simultaneously, new voices emerged, praising the cooperation between the Sildorian delegate and the human crew as a symbol of hope. The unstoppable rumor mill turned in a new direction, spinning tales of humans who braved meltdown sabotage and saved hundreds of alien lives. Aradella, for her part, navigated these political waters with greater confidence than ever before. She found that recounting her experiences on Aster 9 gave others pause, made them question the old fears. Over countless conferences and private meetings, she used what she had learned from Walcott, Reyes, and Park. Fear is inevitable, but it can be a powerful force for progress rather than a paralyzing chain. One late evening, while reviewing documents in her office, she received a small data packet from Earth's diplomatic envoy. Inside was a simple message: "Thank you for believing in us. We will continue to stand together against those who exploit fear. We're not fearless. We just refuse to let fear define us." Along with it were technical schematics for advanced reactor safeguards, as promised. Aradella felt warmth blossom in her hearts. She remembered how Walcott had thrown himself into danger to protect her, how Reyes had fought with unwavering determination, how Dr. Park had calmly overridden sabotage protocols. All of them had embraced fear, harnessed it, and refused to yield. When she finally closed her office for the night, stepping out under the luminous Sildorian moon, she paused to gaze at the star-filled sky. Somewhere out there, the humans continued their journeys, forging alliances, confronting new dangers. The question about their fear still lingered in her mind, but she knew now that it was the wrong question. The real question was whether any species could learn to use fear in such a constructive way. If so, the galaxy would enter a new age of exploration, forging relationships built on mutual respect rather than trembling apprehension. Aradella walked through the quiet streets of her city, her formal robe trailing behind her. She felt changed at her very core. The memories of near-death experiences in Aster 9, the battered corridors, the meltdown averted only by last-second heroics, all served as scars in her mind. Yet they also glowed with a certain fierce hope. She had witnessed the synergy between Sildorian caution and human boldness. And in that synergy, she saw a blueprint for how the galaxy might move beyond old terrors and ancient rivalries. She arrived at her dwelling, an elegant structure with arching windows. Before stepping inside, she gazed at the silent sprawl of the city. Was she frightened about the conspirators who remained at large? Yes. Did she fear the unknown ramifications of forging ties with a species as adaptable and driven as humans? Certainly. But she would not hide from that fear. She would use it to remain vigilant, to strive for better laws, stronger unity, and open channels of communication. She would remember that moment in the corridor when a masked soldier nearly killed her, and how fear had nearly frozen her, until Walcott's intervention had restored her ability to act. Tomorrow, another session of the Assembly beckoned, another day of negotiations that might shape the future of 1,000 worlds. She would stand firm, representing not just Sildorians, but the principle that the galaxy must not let fear be a weapon wielded by the unscrupulous. And if anyone asked her about the humans again, she would recall their unwavering eyes, the trembling but steady breath they took before facing danger, and she would say, "They know fear, perhaps better than any of us. But they refuse to be its victim." She had discovered that truth in the crucible of sabotage, and it had left her forever changed, her blood running cold in awe when she first heard Reyes confess the power of human fear. Slipping into her home, Aradella let the door slide shut behind her. She set aside her robe and gazed out the window at the starless sky. The galaxy felt both vast and close, filled with potential new friendships and lurking dangers. She couldn't know how things would ultimately unfold between Earth and the Assembly, nor how many more times the Zariad Syndicate might strike. But she did know one certainty. As long as species existed who, like humans, chose to rise above the paralysis of fear, the galaxy had a chance to break the chains of old grudges and manipulations. For the first time in ages, she welcomed that fear, letting it remind her she was alive, willing to fight for a future in which no species had to be crushed by terror. And in the back of her mind, she heard the echo of the question that had once haunted her: "Why aren't you scared, human?" And the resonant reply that still made her blood run cold with awe: "We are scared. We just don't let that stop us."